What's going on, everyone? Today we've got a Mercedes C250 4-cylinder turbo. We've got a rattle coming from the chain. This thing's definitely due for a timing job, so we're going to go ahead and get started on it. I've already disconnected a couple of sensors. I'm going to go ahead and just get this intake tube out of the way, and we're going to get right down to the serpentine belt, and I'll start off from there. Mind when you're pulling these off, these little hoses, they've got these clamps on there. They're kind of a permanent clamp. Once you take them off, you're going to have to add a clamp. All right, disconnect the serpentine belt. That is a T60 there. It's going to pop in the tensioner right there. All right, once you disconnect all 12 coolant sensors, just kidding, and your cam sensor over here, this little harness can come up and just go out of the way. And then we're going to do the same on this side, just kind of get this harness up and out of the way. And we're going to have to pull the valve cover on this. So luckily there's not too much going on with that, but we will have to disconnect all these coils and all that, get that out of the way, and then start removing accessory. There goes that front cover holding those sensors there, those VVT solenoid sensors, whatever you want to call them, phaser sensors. That's what it looks like. We've got access to the camshaft, access to the timing chain now. I am going to pull the whole cover. I just wanted to do that to reseal everything. I've loosened all the bolts on this valve cover, so the valve cover can just come out of the way. I just got to finish getting it out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and unbolt the power steering. I'm going to disconnect the water pump there. I don't think I'll have to disconnect all of the AC, just the front bolts there, and the alternator. I got to disconnect some of those bolts. Also, disconnect the battery. Don't forget to do that. Should have been step one that I told you guys, but I didn't. Anyways, I'm going to get back to it. Probably 3 or 4 hours just in the teardown thus far, and I haven't even touched the timing yet. So we're going to have to dig a little bit further into that. I've got to unbolt some stuff over here, get this front cover off, and then I should be at the timing before I call it quits for the day. Unbolt that alternator right there is one of the last main things I got to take off. As far as the pulley here, I did pull the fan out of the way. It's a 27mm socket. I unbolted that with my big gun, and that's why I took the fan out of the way, so I had enough room to do that. And there, it's not pressed on. You don't need a puller or anything for that. It's just a keyway. You just slide that harmonic balancer right off. That job goes for 11.5 hours for anyone that wants to tackle this, and everything's got to get removed, plus an extra hour for AC if you got to do if it's got an AC setup on it, which this does. I didn't know they still made them without AC, but they do. Anyways, I've got the alternator loose. I'm not going to completely remove it because it's bolted on the engine itself as well as this bracket. I've got to disconnect, I want to say 5, 6, or 7 bolts on the oil pan there, and this bolt right here, and I should be able to pop this out. Now, as far as top dead center, that's your top dead center mark right there. We're just off of top dead center right now. So those are your timing marks right there. And you can see the arrows too. They point, and you can see the arrows right there and right there. Those are the marks you would want them to line up with. So I'm just going to do a full rotation of the engine. Now, as far as the sprocket, this is the sprocket, and the OT right there is top dead center, just in case you're wondering. So I'm gonna put the sprocket back on, and I'm just gonna spin this engine over by hand. I might actually reverse spin it. I wouldn't typically advise that. In this case, if you go slow enough, it's not a bad deal because I'm gonna be replacing this timing anyway, so it's not that serious. And I didn't need any specialty tool to remove that. You just unbolt it with a 27mm socket, and it slides right off of that keyway there. Anyways, let me get that done. I digress. All right, there we are. We're at top dead center. You see those lines are lined up to the top. They're not going to be dead set 100% all the time, and that's because this has a VVT setup, so these sprockets have spring tension in there, and they can move slightly. There's a bolt right there. You could see it, maybe, possibly. Yes, no? There's a bolt right there, about center frame. Inverted Torx bit. But there's a dowel in the way right there. So what you do is you pop out this rubber plug here, and you have to thread a bolt in there and rip that dowel out of that guide. Don't mess up this guide unless you want to pull a cylinder head, because apparently the only way to replace that guide in total, even with removing this bottom cover, is to pull the cylinder head, because all this is in the way. Here, you could screw a screw in there, like so. I'm gonna get myself a screwdriver. See if we could just work that out of there. All right, everyone, I'm about 6-ish hours into this Mercedes timing job, and this is where it's gotten me so far. The whole bottom's out. That's the little bra that they put on the oil pan for some unknown reason. Germans, you know what I'm saying? So this is the Mercedes C250 with the 1.8 turbo, and the oil pan has to come down because there's dowels for the timing cover. So I have to drop the oil pan down a little bit, just enough to get that timing cover out. And it's become a little bit of a nightmare, but it's my job. It is what it is. So I'm gonna make informational videos for you guys along the way. Tiny little Torx bits. I did have to drop that steering rack down just a little bit, as you can see, and by a little bit I mean I had to completely disconnect the steering rack to get to all the oil pan bolts. The whole pan doesn't have to come down, it just has to, it doesn't have to come out, sorry, it has to come down enough to clear the timing cover dowels, and that's it, because of the way the timing cover swings out. So we're good there. I'm gonna go ahead and drain the oil tomorrow, because I have not done that yet. I got 2 more bolts in there, and then get that the rest of the way out. All right, here we go. Alternator's undone. And now the timing cover pops right out. Now I don't see a lot of in-depth videos on this. I'm gonna actually set this over here on the table. That's why I'm taking an in-depth video. There's gonna be a lot of editing in here, so please like, share, and subscribe. This is about 2 days worth of work that you'll see that I'll probably end up having knocked down into about a half an hour. Anyways, that's what your timing system looks like. So you got a little O-ring right there for your cooling system. Didn't have to completely remove the oil pan, just drop it down enough, that's all. So should be able to just squeeze that back up. It's got a gasket in there, and then I'll put RTV on the rest. So first things first, I'm going to remove this tensioner. By the way, the engine is at top dead center. Sprockets are all lined up there. So I'm going to remove this tensioner. I'm going to remove this little rubber plug here. We're gonna pull out that pin just like I did over on this side to get that bolt out, and just put a bolt in there and pop the pin out. It did take some force. And then from there we can remove the chain after removing these guides and everything. All right, so once you do that enough, you can see the sleeve in there start coming this way, and then once it gets loose enough, you feel a little pop, and that's it. It just pops out of place. That's all it is. It's a pressed in pin. Set that pin over there for now. And now there's nothing holding that in place. That's it. Now, this one's trickier because the top pin does that, but these 2 pins are fixed. They're not coming out. Be able to see the tensioner here. So there's 2 bolts that hold it in the car. In this case, there's something that looks like this. That's actually your tensioner, and that's what's being replaced. So you pull that out, there she blows. I'm actually gonna bolt that block back down because I am under the impression that when I slam this sucker down, it is probably going to deploy. All right, just wanted to show you guys how I know there's tension on here and that the tensioner has opened up. I'm just gonna loosen this up a little bit. And you can see the rod there staying out. That's a good way to know that you've got tension. And we're gonna torque that down to spec. I'm gonna start getting this back together, and it's probably the last video you'll see of me putting it together because the timing job's done otherwise. And I am gonna show you the after once it's all together and running. Everything going back together is the same process as everything coming apart. We've got everything together except this little intake tube, just for the cold air intake. goes right there. Not super stressed about that right now. I'll fix that afterwards. But I've got the coolant topped off, power steering topped off, everything's together. We're gonna go ahead and pop off the car. I don't like the little delay start, not gonna lie. I'll hook up my scanner and see what's up with that. But it is running smooth. So there you go, Mercedes timing job. 1.8 liter turbo, a lot harder than originally thought, but it is done.